Hi, everyone. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of FCPI podcast. So, as you all know, FCPI has initiated these podcast series in order to explore different arenas of clinical pharmacy profession. And today we are actually here to discuss yet another very important aspect of clinical pharmacy profession, which is how to develop leadership skills. This is unfortunately not a topic that's very much discussed about, but I think this is something that is very essential for us as clinical pharmacists. So we need to understand the importance of developing leadership skills, and also how we can develop these skills as we as we progress in our career. So, to discuss this topic, we have with us Dr. Dina Wantenberg. Dr. Dina is an honorary research associate at the Department of Medicine in Division of Infectious Diseases and HIV at University of Cape Town in South Africa, and she has led and published multiple large-scale collaborative antimicrobial stewardship and infection prevention and control implementation studies across both private and public sectors in South Africa. She has also served as a healthcare executive leader with large multinational hospital and healthcare organizations in South Africa, where she has spearheaded large scale change to improve healthcare systems and patient outcomes. Dina's expertise spans a unique blend of clinical know how and a doctorate in systems engineering. In addition to her research in antimicrobial stewardship implementation, she also works independently with leaders, teams, and organizations to successfully implement health system improvement co-designed with stakeholders. Her goal is actually to empower accomplished and emerging healthcare leaders to make a powerful impact in shaping the future of health systems globally while inspiring them to thrive in their lives and in their careers. So I think she is the most apt person to discuss this very crucial topic with us today. So without any further delay, I would like to invite our guest for this podcast, Dr. Dina Wanderberg. Hi, Dina.
Hey, hello, how are
How are you?
you?
I'm
Lovely
very
to
good.
see you.
How are
Hmm.
you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much
Nice to
for
be on the podcast. Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And it's great to have this conversation with you because I think it's not a very much talked about topic, especially among pharmacists. But
Hmm.
I really feel that that's something we need to discuss about, learn about, and inculcate in our profession.
Absolutely.
So I think before we actually move into this whole discussion, I am very much interested to understand your change in career path. So you started off as a pharmacist, and from your bio, I understand that you did a doctorate in systems engineering. So we usually, I mean, as pharmacists, we usually tend to take a more traditional route, like, you either become a dispensing pharmacist or you work in a pharmaceutical industry, you work as a clinical pharmacist, or few like me go into a research side. But I think this is a very interesting career shift. So I'm really interested to know more about what actually motivated you to change your path to a very, very different arena. And
Yeah.
how has that been like?
Well, Brenda, it was a whole series of things that came together, but I mean, essentially it arose because of how I stepped out of, and we'll talk about that a bit later, but stepped out of my comfort zone in terms of what I was exposing myself to. And, I mean, I ended up doing my doctorate in engineering because of a meeting that I had that was part of a global procurement role that I played. So as a pharmacist, I was responsible for procurement, and I was in a meeting with people from other industries. And I ended up sitting at a meeting with a professor of engineering who I spoke about what I do, and then he invited me to join to apply for this doctorate. He listened to what I said and said, "You should be doing your doctorate." And
Wow.
I was really puzzled. So, I think the point for me, without going into the detail of that story, was that the opportunities for doing something different will come our way at different times, and they
Hmm.
all depend on the degree to which we are open, the degree to which we
Right.
are, networking with others, and that's kind of how my world opened up. And then I came to recognize that pharmacy is really one of the best foundational degrees that you could get. It really equips you for some of the most fantastic opportunities that you can take going forward. And I'm an example of how that can actually, what it can actually lead to, because I
Absolutely.
didn't believe that my degree would be sufficient to get into a doctorate like that. It was at the University of Warwick in the UK. So I also had, a little bit of the, oh, but I'm just, I'm South African, so I wonder if it'll be enough. And yet it was. So, it's a very important thing to remember when we're feeling like not enough, not good enough, etc., to not let that be the limitation, but to actually be able to step out and apply and do things that you wouldn't think are normal, but may just be a fantastic opportunity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
I really like two key points that you just mentioned. One is that opportunities come to you at the most unexpected times, so you need to be open to that. So you should not be like set in your ways and be adamant that you really do what you have learned, and not actually move step aside. I mean, step out of that comfort zone and explore something and see, I mean, what that has done to you. You have created your own
Yeah.
path. And I think as pharmacists, I think you rightly said that we have this feeling that we are not enough, and we are a secondary profession. We are not competent enough. Many a times we do have that feeling. I'm sure many of the participants who are listening also will be going through that emotion, especially when you go for your ward rounds and even when you're interacting with other healthcare professionals. And I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of training that we receive as part of our pharmacy curriculum, because we're not literally trained to lead as such. It may not be intentional, but over our course of our academics, we are trained to just follow the doctor's orders. And I think to an extent that when even when we start doing or joining as a clinical pharmacist or joining as a healthcare professional, that actually leads us to take a secondary role, because you're not trained to actually take a lead position or to take up any leadership role. That's the kind of training that we have received. And even when I did few interviews as part of my PhD work in South Africa, the same thing a pharmacist there also mentioned, that she was saying we're never trained to actually lead. We are trained only to follow doctors' orders. And especially I think that's the case with pharmacists and nurses, because that's the kind of training that we have received. So do you think that's actually a limitation, or that's a challenge that we have as pharmacists?
Look, I think that in some ways we are trained to lead about medicines, about pharmaceuticals, I think most of us feel pretty confident that we are the best trained professionals when it comes to the use of medicines and the use of pharmaceuticals. It's when we are operating inside of a bigger system that we start to feel, where our expertise might not be the most valued in that
Right.
moment, that we start to have those doubts and we step away from leading in that particular arena.
Yeah.
So for me, the opportunity for leadership comes as soon as you start being interested in being part of something bigger, in terms of making an impact on the whole health system, in making an impact on things that you can see you could actually play a role in. And that for me is important. Now, I think we could do more in our curriculum about catalyzing more leadership. But
Right.
most of that can, for any of you that are still students and are still out there, the fact is there are opportunities to become to practice your leadership by joining the student organizations, by
Right.
initiating things. There are things you can already start to do, because you have to be interested in leading, as early as possible. That'll make a huge difference. My first
Absolutely.
leadership roles were in student organizations. We're
Wow.
leading little student organizations, arranging events, thinking of ideas for us as students. Those are all part of the seeds of what will later become, a much bigger role in bigger organizations. But it's important to actually use those opportunities. And
Right.
yes, I think there's also room, and a lot of more pharmacists are doing business degrees as postgrads, are doing, so there is a more of a movement like that I can see happening now, in the more modern times, as they take up new positions, etc. That's important.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I think many of the participants who are actually watching this episode would be already following you on LinkedIn. And so, anyone who actually visits Dina's LinkedIn page, the first thing that they see is that you are an award winning healthcare change leader. So, can you just explain to our participants what does that mean? Like, what is a healthcare change leader?
Yes. Okay. So for me, a healthcare change leader is somebody who is interested in making change in the health system and actually brings that into action.
Hmm.
And that's the important word for me. So you can have a longing and a yearning to do that, but the important thing is that you are actually in action. Now, I became an award-winning change leader in a way that wasn't intentional. But I was passionate about seeing something different. So, I started seeing opportunities to do things in my own setting, first of all, in my own hospitals, then in the leadership role that I played. And then as those changes became more well known, as I documented my data and I presented at conferences, and I started sharing my passion for this work, my passion for like creating something more, like we should be doing this, we should be doing these things to serve patients, to serve the system, to improve the health system. That led to me playing a role within the South African context. I then started collaborating with leaders internationally, and it took on another flavor. So all of that evolved over time, and that's, change leadership is about leading something that could be better. And it
Hmm.
doesn't need you to have a position. You don't have to have a title to be a change leader. You have to have a will to do something about something that needs improving. And you have to then approach people. You have to have that initiative to start doing something about it, and following that up, and being willing to be rejected, and being willing to fail occasionally. But all of that leads to a lot of experience, which
Yep.
is what creates leadership.
Yep. I think
Yeah.
when one hears the term leader, the picture that comes to our mind is, someone who's at a position of authority, who's actually leading a group of people. But like you rightly said, it need not be that. It need not be someone at a position of power. It is just someone who is initiating something to create a change. It can be as simple as that. So it could just be, implementing a small intervention in your hospital, just presenting your work at conferences, publishing your work. I think all those things actually nurtures your leadership skills going forward. So especially as students, I think that's one thing that they can start inculcating in themselves right from this stage. So they need not wait to be
Absolutely.
leaders to join an organization as a healthcare professional. So that's, I think, even in India, I see a lot of pharmacists doing amazing work around antimicrobial stewardship. And unfortunately, none of those are published. It's not disseminated widely, so people don't know about it. And we keep complaining
Yes.
that there are not enough opportunities for clinical pharmacists in our country. It's very sad that this, but I feel that we are not taking that ownership and leadership to actually change the scenario. So, and for me,
Exactly that.
changing the scenario, the first step to do is actually put out what you're doing. But I
Yes.
from what I understand, that's quite challenging also for people to,
Yes.
especially ones who have not done it before, to actually break out of their shell and come out. So, from your experience, what do you think as students and budding clinical pharmacists? What can our participants do to actually start putting out their work in conferences, or just disseminating their work to a wider population?
Yeah. So of course, the first thing you have to do is have some data. And pharmacists are really good at and diligent about collecting data if they recognize that they need to do it. So that we would easily collect data for our boss or for our for our professor or for our whatever, we would easily do that, and we would do a brilliant job of that. So when it comes to this story now, you've got to collect data for you about what you're doing. So you have to start by, if you're wanting to go this route, to create the credibility as a leader, you need to have some data and some stories about what you've done. And many of us will just work hard, will not document. I mean, I know I did that myself. So, I didn't have this all ticked off, right from the beginning. I definitely did the work, didn't record it. And because I was really happy with what I was doing and I loved my work, I thought that was enough, but it wasn't enough for the kind of roles that I wanted to play. It wasn't enough to establish myself as somebody who could be given an opportunity. And that's what you miss out on when you don't do this. So for me, first of all, start by documenting. You can journal if you don't want to, write every day a little bit about what you've done so that you've got a record. But if you are doing things that are like interventions or get a little piece of paper next to, that you can write things down and that you can record. And for those that are more tech savvy, I was with a pharmacist the other day, and she's collecting everything on her phone all the time in Google Docs and in beautiful stuff. That now the next step to that is like, how do I put this together into a story to publish it and to do that? And for that, first of all, don't underestimate how much guidance you get when you actually sit down and look at what it takes to apply. They often provide you, like, this is what we want to write an abstract. Many sites will actually say this is how to even write one. So there are lots of resources for you to learn online and in other ways. But the other way to do it is to find a good mentor, somebody who you can work with, who can support you. And I love, one of the ways I got over my fear was also to collaborate. So I knew what I was good at doing, but I collaborated with people that were better than me at writing for journals and for things like that. And over the years, I've learned so much from them that I've gotten better at writing myself, and I can mentor others. But I'm still learning from people that are great at that. But there are also people who are writing, doing abstracts, doing publications, but they're not stepping into leadership. They're kind of accumulating their list of, publications, and that isn't serving something bigger. So I feel that what you just said, if you are going to publish all these amazing things that you do as a clinical pharmacist, you also have to become the voice for change. The person who's prepared to speak up, to be at the table, to start being somebody who approaches leadership, who is brave enough to say, we should have these posts, or I want to. Now, I've had so many of those stories, I cannot tell you. I mean, things that I never believed were possible, because I was so determined, in the same way that you're speaking, that pharmacists should play a bigger role. I mean, the company I was with when I was a young pharmacist actually ended up sponsoring a post for me at the university to train other clinical pharmacists that worked in their organization. And I dreamt that up along the way. I dreamt that up as I spoke to the prof. He said, it would be great if we could do, but I still had the courage to go back and rally. And it was a pathway. It wasn't like I woke up one morning and then knocked on the door and the door swung wide open. No, it was a conversation here, a conversation here, a talk here, a speech here, a document here. It was a whole series of small steps that led to them going, maybe we do need to do this. And I can see the value that this brings as time went by.
Right. So
Mm.
do you remember what was that moment like when you realized you are having all this data, but you're not actually doing anything with this, and you need to change your ways and do something more? Do you remember when it was and what actually triggered that?
I just remember feeling so frustrated with the status quo. And in a particular moment was when I had a boss who wanted me to stay more in the pharmacy. And, she just couldn't see the value that we could bring.
Right.
And there was an and in this sentence. It wasn't as if I didn't understand that there were still things we had to do in the pharmacy. But that frustration, you know, together with the vision, because I'd read a lot and I'd seen what was happening elsewhere, I had a vision of what could be.
Hmm.
Sometimes you feel so stuck if you're too insular and you're not reading or following people
Yep.
on LinkedIn or following other people that are doing amazing things. You don't even know what's possible. So I feel like the combination of frustration and vision was what drove me. It was, I cannot sit here and just do this for the next 20 years.
Right.
I have to do something about this.
Right. I think at least for a few pharmacists doing these, publications or presentation, they take it as an additional burden. So something they, especially when it is not something that they are required to do, but if it is something like an optional thing that they have to do, they tend to opt out, saying that you're not mandated to do it, so why should I do it? Because your degree certificate is not based on whether you have published or you have presented, or your once
Yeah.
you join as a pharmacist, your salary may not be dependent on how many papers you publish. So when things are not mandated, people think, at least some of them will have a tendency to say, okay, that's an additional thing that I'm taking upon myself, which I need not. And but like you said, I think doing these things is actually rewarding. May not be monetary rewards, but the fulfillment that one gets, and probably you might be inspiring at least one person in the audience with your presentation. So if you're talking about stewardship implementation, there would be someone in the audience who is struggling actually to implement stewardship, and something that you say might resonate with them. So in your career, like that's spanning so many years, have you do you remember any such stories where you have presented something and you have inspired someone? I mean, I'm sure there would be lots of it, but something
Yeah.
that comes on top of your head.
Well, I've got lots of stories where I come across people who say, Dina, I heard you, and
Hmm.
I think that you can take as a given. And that for me is one of the motivations for putting your work out there.
Yep.
Because for one thing, whatever it is you're doing, I mean, all of us as pharmacists, whether you want to be a leader or not, want to have people have a calling to serve in some way. And so if you're wanting to have safe medicines, or you want to make, serve your own patients that you deal with one-on-one, the fact is, if even that you're doing and how you're doing it can be valuable to other people. And that that for me is what I felt initially. I wanted more people to be doing the kinds of things that I was doing because of how it was improving the health system and because of how it was serving patients in the longer term.
Hmm.
So that sharing of information means that the impact you make as a professional is so
Right.
much bigger than just one. Your impact amplifies because you
Yeah.
share what you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to step into leadership, but when you do step into leadership, that amplifies even more because you start calling, you start being a voice that calls people to action in a specific direction, that can see the vision of where we want to go and is willing to speak up and is willing to be the inspiration for that. So, so many of the people that I first taught, when I was teaching still, have gone on to become pharmacy leaders in their own right. And that is, for me, so inspiring to see that also happening. And then, I mean, I think we mustn't underestimate the feeling of the fun that it is, like let's not,
Yeah.
like it is. There's something
Yeah.
about doing things together and
Yep.
making an impact together that is fun and it
Mm.
feels good. And it feels like something, it takes your career just from being hard work to being exciting.
Yep.
And that's why I am a big advocate for stepping into leadership and becoming a change leader yourself.
Mm.
And that could be, no matter where you are, it could be changing how you interact in a retail setting.
Yep.
Like, that there's so much transformation that's possible to change how pharmacists operate there. It can be in hospitals, it can be in industry, it can be anywhere. There are things that are going to change, and there are things that we can be the instrument of change for. And that's
Right.
exciting.
Right. And you did mention about the role of mentors. And I think that's very important, especially when a budding professional is trying to take up leadership roles. That kind of a support system is very much necessary. So I can say from my own experience that I was able to take up new work and new projects and explore different things only because I had a good leadership in our hospital, and I was working with doctors who actually supported pharmacists in their team, and they wanted pharmacists to take up more and more roles. But everywhere that may not be possible, so you can't
Mhm.
expect every team to be very supportive and welcoming changes. So any change can be an issue for at least some of the professionals in a team. So from your experience, how do you think early professionals can actually manage that? How do you think they can,
Yeah.
especially in a situation where they don't have a support system in their hospital? How do you think they
Yeah.
can do it?
So, I shared with you that my manager was not one of those
Yeah,
people. She didn't
exactly.
want this to all explode. She just wanted everything to stay the same.
Hmm.
So there were a couple of things. First of all, I started working outside of, I started making connections outside of my immediate setting. And again, that's through societies, through the professional bodies that are out there. That's one aspect. And then nowadays, I mean, I didn't have that luxury when I was a young professional, but nowadays, the opportunity to connect with people on platforms like LinkedIn
Yep.
is incredible.
Yep.
And that for me is another way for you to start exploring and to find your mentors. And I feel that nowadays we used to think a mentor, you can have multiple mentors. They don't have to be one. There can be a person
Hmm.
who you follow because of how they do one thing, and another person you follow because they offer you insight in a very specialized field. Um, but so you can have that kind of relationship, and you'll be amazed how how you can build real connection even through that sort of platform. So I feel if you're feeling stuck where you are and you're feeling like there's not enough support,
Hmm.
find support around you as a starting point, but also closer to home. So I started engaging more with some of the nursing team
Hmm.
and found
Wow.
a nurse leader who
Right.
was really keen for me to do some more things. And I made, there was a head of the intensive care unit, a nurse leader, and she used to request that I come and do
Hmm.
things. And so you start to build your connections around you, and then that becomes it'll grow into something, and then you can keep going back. But even the person, when I say my boss wasn't supportive, that also needs work. You have to sometimes lead up, you lead upwards, and
Hmm.
you have to have a combination of humility and information
Right.
that I feel can also turn it around. So having the courage to keep bringing back information and going back to them and doing things within the framework that they allow, but also asking if you can do more
Hmm.
as things progress.
Right.
And if you like the diligent pharmacists that we all are. You know, many we're always. I don't find lazy, bad attitude. I really don't see that. I see frustrated pharmacists
Yeah.
occasionally,
Yeah.
but I don't. I think at their heart, they're always diligent. They always do their
Yeah.
jobs well.
Absolutely.
So if you keep asking to do more, it gets hard to say no. It's hard to say no.
Right. Right.
You
I think those are very, very, very important two points that you've mentioned. One is actually collaborating with nurses and other professionals in the team, and not literally going and asking doctors if they're even if they're not cooperative, just collaborating with other professionals in your team. That's very important. And even the second point, like, you might get a lot of no's, but still go behind them and ask for more opportunities. I think that
Yeah,
really, you're right. I mean, there's a point when, they lose that and they're like, fine, do whatever you want. At least that might
yeah,
be
yeah,
the final
yeah.
destination then.
I mean, I always tell the story. I started my clinical pharmacy. I started doing a ward round. Actually, one of the nurses enabled it. She said, come with us. And it was early in the morning, before the pharmacy even opened. So I didn't have to ask my boss. But um, the surgeon who we did the round with was, he sort of looked at me and thought, like, who you? And she said, no, this is Dina. She's from the pharmacy. And, she was very helpful. And he hardly said a word to me for about 2 months. But
Wow.
I did all of my stuff. I looked up every drug and I made sure I started learning everything about his field and what he does. And he was a cardiovascular surgeon. And, you know, over time, I could contribute. I could start
Hmm.
offering a view, and I got more courageous to do that.
Right.
And eventually, he, I got promoted eventually, and
Wow.
he went back to the management, the hospital management, and said he wants another person like me to
Woohoo!
join
Wow.
him. So you see how that
That's
actually
amazing.
leads to change,
That's amazing.
because you set the scene. He initially doesn't think, but you start slowly, slowly, slowly adding your value, being confident about what you're doing. And that led to, and then a second pharmacist came and replaced me. And she was so thrilled to have that opportunity, but it didn't exist
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
I did that, So, yeah,
Absolutely.
so that's how you can do it.
Yeah. Even when I was doing my internship here, I had this posting in orthopedics department, and the surgeons there were not very much welcome to having pharmacists in their team, and they didn't know what pharmacists could do because they are not familiar with clinical pharmacy profession. So when I joined the team, I actually went and introduced myself to the head of the department, and he's like, "Yeah, join my rounds, whatever. I don't care." That was the attitude. And then I think first 1 or 2 weeks, I was just following the teams. I also didn't know how it could contribute, but I still remember very clearly this one day during the ward rounds when someone from outside had come and he was speaking to the lead surgeon. And I don't know, I don't remember what the conversation was, but I remember him saying, he just looked at me behind and he's like, there are so many people following me, but I really don't know what they're doing here. And he looked directly at me and he said, and that was really, I mean, it was a very turning point for me. And then I was like, there's something that I have to do and show my value here. And then I actually went
Right,
back, started reviewing the patient files, and I found that there were drug interactions in few of the patients' medications. So I was very hesitant to actually go and approach the surgeons with my intervention, thinking that, they are not as it is welcoming my presence there. How are they going to treat me if I go and tell them that, they need to modify their
mm,
prescription? But the change was amazing. I just went and told them that, this medication should not be given with this. You need to space it a bit. And they were amazed. And
yeah,
the attitude completely changed, I would say, in a day. From the next day onwards, they were
yeah,
like, every bed they go to, they're like, is there any medication do you think we need to modify? Are you okay with the prescription? I was like, wow, that just one intervention changed the
yeah,
whole attitude. So
yeah.
like you said,
No,
I mean,
exactly that.
you will get a lot of rejections, but I think as pharmacists, we shouldn't feel bad. It's very difficult to do that, especially when we get constant rejections. But I think there will be a point when, people start accepting what you want to do. And actually,
Yeah.
that leads to my next question. That's about, building your LinkedIn profile and networking. I know that you and Dr. Smita Charani, who's my mentor, are big advocates of networking and collaborating. And I think you both are the ones who have actually motivated me to act to, become more present or more visible on social media platforms, be it LinkedIn or Twitter or X, as they call it now. But I don't think many of the pharmacy students and pharmacists are actually using these platforms to make their work more visible. I mean, they might put up a post saying, they have published this paper, or they have started a new position, or they have presented this. But how do you think they can actually use these platforms to build their networks and to showcase their work?
Yes, I think the first thing that's important is, we have to recognize that these platforms have changed over time, and that people used to think that LinkedIn, I thought that LinkedIn was for when you want to get a new
Yeah,
job.
me too.
Okay, that's what we all thought.
Yeah.
However, the platform has completely changed. Of course, if you want to get a job, it's also there for that purpose. However, it is also there for you to put forward the things that you are passionate about and to serve the people you want to serve. So, it's got a role. The reason I love it is because it has the opportunity to create your own brand in the way that you want to. It's professional, it can be
Yep.
conservative, it can be outgoing if you want it, it can be very reserved if you want to. It doesn't have to, it can be exactly you, but
Hmm.
it is the opportunity to share information and to share opportunities and also to look for information and opportunities from others. And the reason I'm passionate about collaborating is because, first of all, just working hard on your own is lonely. It's not fun to just do that. It feels like it doesn't feel joyful for me.
Mm.
So the more I collaborate, the more I can work with other people. It brings me joy, first of all, because I have interaction and I meet
Yep.
these amazing people like you and Ismita, etc. That's been such an amazing thing. But at the same time, it also means the work that you do gets amplified. So when I first started doing antimicrobial stewardship in a small setting, then I got to do it across multiple hospitals. Then I got to do it in the public sector and the private sector. That, it just felt like such a wonderful use of my time that it was much more than I'd ever expected to be able to do. And collaborating created that opportunity. And to this day, I still meet people and they want to keep collaborating. They want us to keep coming up with things. And that means we can make a bigger impact. So I think that's one of the reasons to collaborate. But using these platforms to share information. I mean, if you go to X, for me, X was the most amazing platform for getting the latest literature
Yep.
that I would, here in South Africa, if you don't have an academic post, you don't have access to literature so
Mm.
easily. But there, I could access the world's best leaders and I could direct message them
Mm.
if I wanted to and
Yep.
say, I read your article and I'm curious about this and I was wondering, does this also apply to this and this and this? And
Wow.
they are delighted
Of
that
course.
somebody is
Of
reading their papers. When you see it in your own setting, I've watched how my papers have had so many more reads. I always say, you do your work. I don't know if you belong to ResearchGate, but I'm on
yeah, yeah,
ResearchGate and
yeah,
it
yeah,
tells you how many people have cited your
yeah,
paper
yeah.
and how many people have read it and
Hmm.
how many views there've been. So, when I look at some of that and 5,000 people have read my paper, I'm thinking like, wow, Like, instead of me doing this little bit of work and it just sits here, 5,000 people have read it. 30 people have cited it, which means they've actually read it and used it in their own research. That is so fulfilling for me. And that's why I am active on LinkedIn. Then I think there's the bit about the stories of our lives. Our stories are important, and our stories make everybody understand that they're not alone. So
Mm,
I mean, on my profile, I don't only tell the stories of all my accomplishments, etc. I also tell the stories of the hardships I've faced and the
yes,
things that I've
yes.
faced as a professional. And I think that also makes us more relatable, and it also makes us recognize that I've also, I mean, one of my top posts was the story of I got rejected
Mm,
3 times for a CEO position. Now, people, look at me now and they think, oh my gosh, Dina, like, how did you do that? But actually, that's a real story. It was very painful, but I stuck it through, and I share all the actions that I took along the way as part of that process. So, yeah, I think that's it. I love it because it makes me real. I don't have to try and
mm,
be like, um, you know, some superstar. I can just be real,
right,
and that
right,
feels good for me. Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
I think even I had the same issue because when I started, when I joined these social media platforms, I was like, okay, how do I put out saying that, I've presented my work somewhere? Would it be like, just me blowing my own trumpet? Would it sound like, would it sound odd? But I think it was after I interacted with you that I understood, there is another way of using these social media platforms. And I think anyone who's listening to this podcast, if not following Dina on LinkedIn, please go and follow her because she puts out very frequently these amazing posts about that's like a story in itself. It's quite long, but it's like a story in itself. Like you walk us through the whole scenario and what you have learned about it, and you encourage people to actually comment on your post, to share their viewpoints. So I think that's really fascinating and engaging as well. Because when you just put out there saying, you have done this work, that's it. It's not engaging. It might not be engaging enough. But what I really like about your post is that you also welcome the ones who are viewing the post to share their experiences. I think that's a
Yeah.
very interesting way of putting out post.
Well, look, and the other thing is, I can say I'm so thrilled that I went to this conference,
Hmm.
or because I write posts for an audience, for the people that I want to serve, I can say, I'm thrilled I'm so thrilled to have learned the following 3 things
Right.
at this
Right.
conference.
Right.
And then I'm not just saying I went to this conference, I'm saying these are the 3 things I learned. And I'm sharing those learnings now with the people who read the posts. And
Hmm.
if you are looking at your own, what do you want to be known for? And who are the people that you want to serve? So if you are a PhD student, how can you serve other PhD students? Or how can you serve pharmacists that are aspiring to
Hmm.
do their PhD? Then when you say, I'm so happy to do that, then you have to write it so that you're also inspiring those people.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that makes all the difference. It takes away
Yes.
that story about, oh, I'm bragging or I'm whatever,
Hmm.
I'm arrogant, but
Yeah.
because you're not when you go into that process.
Hmm. Yeah, that was one of the posts that I got maximum engagement on LinkedIn, where you actually motivated me to write about, what are the things to look for when you start PhD. Oh, I think it was a
Right.
year back.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but I got a lot of people. That's when I realized that there are so many people, so many pharmacists out there who actually want to do PhD, and they were looking for the right guidance, and they had so many
Yes.
questions, and that was a very different experience for me. And another
Yeah,
thing
and
that I
every
actually,
day they still do that. They're still feeling that way and they're still wondering. And even if they've finished their own PhD,
hmm,
they've got something else that they're experiencing. Like, what do you do as a postdoc?
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry,
that's
say
true.
more.
No, I was just saying, it's actually when I joined your collab academy that I came across this term lone wolf. I never knew about that
Right.
term, and you keep repeating that. And I think reflecting back, I really understand what it means. And how we should break out of it. So maybe for the participants who are listening, if you could just briefly tell what a lone wolf is and why that is problematic, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a lone wolf is somebody who does all the work, works on their own, and takes no credit for it either. So my example, as a young pharmacist just coming out into the big wide world, one of the things I did is I started a drug information newsletter in our hospital. And I always tell the story that I wrote, I called it the pharmacy newsletter. And the authors I wrote as the pharmacy. I didn't put my name on it. I did every single thing in that. I used to go to the library, look at the journals, summarize the articles that were relevant for our hospital. And, you know, I kept bringing that out month after month after month after month. And actually, I didn't realize that it was a lonely and you know, it was of course playing a role in terms of providing information, but it wasn't any fun. It didn't create opportunities because no one knew. No one
Right,
knew. So
right.
lone wolf are often invisible as well. They
Hmm.
often, because they put their head to the grindstone and their nose to the grindstone and they just keep going. Now that's a good quality. I'm not saying it's not. Often, like I always say, in my lone wolf stage, I built up my confidence, I built up my skills, but now it's time to take it out there. And that's what I want to say to all of you that have worked hard, that have done all the hard work, that are experts at what you're doing, is now it's time. Now that you've done all of that, it's fine. You can honor that part of you that used the time to do that, but now bring it out into the world so that it can serve a bigger role. And then do it with other people, because it not only gives you people to work with, but it also amplifies your work. So I also had to get over this idea that if I gave away, if I worked with other people, I'd give away my ideas.
Right,
Or
right.
that if I work with, so I started saying I love working alongside other excellent people, because you can be excellent and unique and work with other excellent and unique people. And that together will create something amazing. But if you want to keep holding on to everything and be a lone wolf all on your own, do you know, even the myth of a wolf, the wolf, when the wolf goes out on its own, they go looking for a mate. That's when you know, that image or the metaphor of the wolf is like they're howling at the moon and
Yeah,
doing those
yeah.
things. That's only for a purpose, one purpose. After that, the wolves operate in packs
Yes.
for their maximum survival. And I think that's true of us. There's a time when you have to do the work yourself. You have to finish your PhD. You can't get away from that. Okay. But you can bring support alongside that to support you, to inspire you, to prop you up when you need to get ideas from, to bounce ideas off. That turns you from lone wolf into collaborator, and that makes all the difference.
I think something that I have experienced is especially when you become a leader and you're actually leading a few others. There are points where it's difficult for you to make people do their work. So you just decide, okay, it's better that I do it all
Ah,
myself. I don't, because it's an additional effort that you have to actually go behind them and ask them to do it. So you end up thinking that, okay, it's better that I do it and finish it off. That's easier to do in terms of time, energy, everything. But again, like you said, that in the long run, that also becomes problematic because you do
it
all the
does.
work, you don't get the credit. It becomes too much of a burden for you and you can't sustain it in the long run. So,
And you don't serve them.
yeah.
You also don't serve those people. So a young leader asked me this question the other day, and she said, I'm finding it so hard because, you know, I've got a high standard. And I go,
Um,
well, you just got to keep communicating your standard, because how will they ever learn if you
hmm.
keep taking it back and doing it yourself to your standard? You have to say, I'm sorry, can you please have a look at this again? These are the points where, so as a leader, you have to also be willing to have those conversations. There's
Yeah.
a wonderful technique that I've heard, which is called the sandwich. You can call in somebody as a leader and you can say, I really love having you in the team. You always bring so much enthusiasm and you're so diligent and hardworking, and I love that. And I want us to sit down now and just go through this work that has happened. So you sandwich it now with a bit that says, and these sections here are not really what I was looking for. I'm
Hmm.
looking for these and these and these things.
Right.
And then you sandwich it on the other side by saying, and I know that you're really, really capable of getting this right.
Wow.
And you close it off like that.
Wow.
Okay.
I think
So
that's a very effective method.
yes, it doesn't have to be, sit me down, tell me I'm terrible and this is not good
Yeah.
enough, and then put it on, that
Yeah.
those are old ways of operating. You can be respectful and you can really still serve that person by sharing some insights and some feedback in a way that they can go away and do something better,
Hmm. Right.
but that you still value them.
Hmm. It's
They know
true.
you
That's
still
true.
value
That's
them.
true.
Yeah.
That's a very effective way of giving a feedback as well, because many a times when
Yes.
leaders give feedback or mentors give feedback, it might turn into a criticism as well. Or the
It
the
feels
recipient,
like that.
yeah,
It
recipient might
feels
take
like
it
that.
take it that way,
Yes.
even though the
Yes.
intention is not that. But I think this is a
Yes.
very good way of putting it. I think
Yeah.
it's almost time to finish off the episode. So, something that I really want to touch upon is, as a healthcare change leader, when you're looking at healthcare from a very macroscopic point of view, what do you think are some of the changes that needs to happen? So, for me, I have experience only working in an Indian healthcare system. So, here in India, the healthcare system is quite hierarchical. So, especially for a pharmacist to take up leadership roles or to lead something can become quite challenging. It might hurt certain egos. We might have to break hierarchies. So that hierarchical structure, I feel, really needs to change in India to enable more and more changes to happen. So, from your experience, what do you think are some of the major areas that needs to change in healthcare?
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you that the hierarchy is important, but I also feel that there is a change in how um, the hierarchy within the profession is one thing, and then the hierarchy between the professionals as a group and
Hmm.
citizens is another hierarchy
Yep.
that needs to be addressed. And probably some of the big work we need to do is to, really empower citizens to take care of their own health, to
Yep.
understand to be involved in decision making, to have a role in building new health systems. And I think we're already seeing that
Hmm.
movement
Yep.
happening. So, of course, the big changes globally for me are still about equity and access. Those elements, need us to change. And I think they are going to be the catalysts for the change in hierarchy, because we have to start thinking differently about how we can provide health care to more people across the globe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But we also have the opportunity to do some amazing new things. And I
Mm.
think that's where, like, I've seen pharmacists globally becoming entrepreneurs in very niche areas. Like
Yep.
there are people that I'm following that have become coaches, health coaches
Hmm.
in niche areas, that have become patient advocates. Like there's a pharmacist who works with children and moms, when moms are too scared to ask questions, and that she's
Wow.
acting as the advocate, and she set up
Wow.
her own entrepreneurial business. She helps them whenever they get a script, they send it to her and she looks at it, and she's got a sort of a membership model. There are new business models, ways to earn a living, because of course we've all got ideas, but you've got to make sure those ideas can actually earn you a living. But there's so
Absolutely.
many things that are happening now in that space. Technology is going to shift, um, the playing fields a lot as well. And that's why I'm kind of I'm confident that having the skill as a change leader is one of the most critical skills that you could have in the future, in terms of the future of your professional role. Because you will have these opportunities coming at you, and if you don't feel confident enough to take them up, they'll just go by and you'll still be where you are. So, building those skills, are critical to be able to seize the opportunities as you go forward.
Right. I mean, I can go on with this conversation for as much time.
Yeah.
We have to slowly wind up. So, my last concluding question is, from your experience, is there a key leadership advice that you would like to give to emerging pharmacy leaders out there?
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that now, like at this stage, and like with all of my experience, I want to say, like, do the inner work so that you can make the outer impact. So, when I say that, I really mean that, many of us have a longing and a yearning for things, and they need us to, the inner work, like we've spoken about some of the barriers, some of the mindset barriers that we have. That's all inner work, all of the, like, I don't feel confident enough to do things. That's inner work. Like, how can I build that confidence? And when you do that work, you start to make the outer impact easier and easier and easier. So actually we are doing, many people think I must go get another degree, another this, another this, another that. You can do that, but if you don't do the inner work as well, it becomes so much harder to fulfill your dreams. Now, when we read out my bio, it said, I want people to make an impact in healthcare, but
Yep.
I also want them to fulfill their dreams, to have the
Hmm.
life that they want. And for that, it needs us to, and I think that's another part of the change. We've got to be able to build professional careers that are more sustainable for us as health professionals. That don't mean we sacrifice family and we sacrifice, adventure. And
Yes,
we want to
absolutely.
do both of those. And I'm excited about how that's changing and how young people especially are just saying, I want more.
Yeah.
And, and I think we've got to create that and serve the health system.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's always, I get really inspired after speaking to you every time. And I'm sure all the participants have also got a lot of takeaway messages. And I truly hope that all of you listening to the podcast will be able to implement at least some of what has been discussed today. So, like I mentioned in my bio, and I mean, throughout the podcast, it would have been really evident that Dina has a lot of experience in training leaders and bringing out more healthcare changes. So, whatever she has said is definitely from her own experience, and that adds a lot of value to her suggestions. So, thank you so much, Dina, once again. And
Thank you. And well done to all of you that are doing this amazing work for clinical pharmacy in India. I
yeah,
think it is extraordinary. And
thank
I'm so
you.
inspired by you all.
Thank you so much. All
Super.
right. Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye. Thanks.